Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Djire. I am the country manager for Frame, and we are a geospatial data company focused exclusively on Africa. And basically, we help different organizations understand their customers and be able to make data-driven decisions down to the lowest level possible. By design, we work with a lot of organizations, right? And they're all trying to answer the same question, which is around people, understanding who they are, what they do, how do we behave, and subsequently trying to find the best way to reach them. And we all have heard the issue of lack of data, not only in Nigeria, but also in Africa. And I think what makes Frames unique is really our fascination for data and the way we go about making that actionable for companies to be able to use data to make decisions not only on a one-time basis, but also on a regular basis, right? To go more into the technology and the process behind it, I'll try to kind of break it down so we are all on the same page. We've spent the past 5 years collecting high-quality survey data that is geotagged. And for people who are not familiar with geotag data, the fact that it has geographic coordinates. So when I go and ask an organization about, let's say, a household about, let's say, consumption, I know the location down to the geographic coordinate, longitude and latitude. So we have about 50 billion data points on African consumers. What makes us really unique is the ability to match that with satellite imagery. And we use complicated statistical methodology to be able to kind of like create powerful insight on African consumers. So now, instead of looking at population at a Nigeria level or Lagos level, we're now able to look at LGA level and even neighborhood level down to 1 by 1 square kilometer area. So basically, today we have the ability to look at any 1 square kilometer anywhere in Africa and tell you who lives there, how much money do they make, how much do they spend on water, on bread, and on across hundreds of product categories. So because this is people-driven, it's very interesting to be able to understand the dynamics of how do people differ from one neighborhood to the next, and how should companies think about really, let's say, the target customers from one city to the next. So throughout this presentation, I want to take you through looking at the African consumer, right? Just to show you a little bit of our work in this space. Also show you what is possible geospatially around people and bring that out around retail, and finally talk about how companies can leverage this to be able to streamline their operations. 3 weeks ago, we released a report called the Dynamic African Consumer. So basically, to my point earlier, how do we compare a customer in different locations, right? Assuming that you are a retail organization, or let's say you're a company targeting a consumer that can spend, let's say, $100 on your product. How can you find the same consumer in, let's say, in Lagos, in Abuja, in Nairobi, in Accra, in Abidjan, and all that? So the effort to create what is a unified consuming class was led by a recent research using what we call the NCCS, which is the new consumer classification system used in India. Basically, they categorize consumers across, let's say, 5 classes. So A, B, C, D, and E, with C1, with C2, with C3, and forth. What that allows us to do is able to tell you, you know what, if I take a consumer in Nigeria, I can build the profile of that consumer here, and I can find the same consumer in South Africa, I can find the same consumer in Abidjan. I can find the same consumer in Burkina Faso when I'm from, and all that. So this is mostly focused around ABC1 consumers. In other words, kind of like the consuming class. It's not surprising that when you look at this particular consuming class, of course, they will be spending more on more expensive assets than your traditional consumer. And it's really important as you look at the consuming class, the ABC1 consuming class, to be able to understand the nuance in different locations. In the case of Nigeria, we took a look at how did this consuming class evolve over time. When we take 2008, right before the recession in 2016, we see a dramatic change, right? Nationally, it is still centered around the D and E consumers, which are the poorest. But when you look at, let's say, Lagos, for instance, you have a strong concentration of the ABC1 here. I would really encourage you guys to check our report on the dynamic African consumers, where we really break those analyses down. But here we just a quick synopsis of the analysis. Lagos. So we have a top 5, right? We have Egypt. We have Egypt with 78 million. We have Nigeria with 52. Followed by South Africa, and then you have Algeria as well. So understanding this particular consumer and the way they behave subnaturally is very important as you think about making decisions. And in the effort to kind of map those consumers across the country, some locations really pop up that are quite interesting. You look at Owerri, for instance, Kano, and Sokoto, and Ibadan, and all these particular locations. So you can imagine that once you're able to understand consumers, you're able to map their locations, you can do a lot of things with that. And part of one of the ways we leverage geospatial data is able to size market geospatially, right? Basically understand where real opportunities are and how an organization can think about benefiting from those intelligence. And a quick example of that would be when we look at pharmaceutical, for instance, in Nigeria. I don't know if anybody is in pharmaceutical here, but this is one of the many ways we can kind of like estimate the size of a particular industry, right? We have about $1.4 trillion is being spent on over-the-top counter drugs, and 40% of that is in the informal space. Why we're able to know that because we know these people, we know the household, we know where they're concentrated at, and we can map them across the country, as you can see that. Not only we can do that at a national level, but even bring that out to like 1 by 1 square kilometer in the country as well. This is a nice example of bread and cereal in Egypt, right? Just to show you what is possible, to be able to map not only the market potential in different cities, but even so map it across different consumer groups. I think the final example here would be mapping that for financial services in Nigeria. This is, I think, in Kenya. Who are the people who have access to finances, to bank accounts, what do they look like, and we can build interesting profile of these people. Not only we can do that here, but we can do that across many African countries as well. So bringing this back to retail, how is this really important? How can retailers really benefit from understanding consumers and be able to streamline their operations, make better decisions, especially when it comes to expansion? One of the ways we can leverage this data in the retail space would be, first of all, to build a profile of your target customers, right? I will assume that a SPAR will have a different target consumer group than a Chicken Republic, right? Or a Health Plus. So being able to understand, build a profile of those target customer becomes very important to be able to figure out where it makes sense to expand, where it makes sense to kind of like double down and even move away from. Market sizing, as I just showed you recently, site selection, and also site optimization. And I'm going to walk you through some analysis that we do that you might find super interesting in terms of the application of geospatial in retail. This is an example of some work that we've done for an organization that was seeking to, let's say, expand their location in the QSR space. They define the customers to where we have primary customers and secondary customers. Once we know those customers are, it becomes very interesting to build the profile of those customers, right? Household structure, how much are they spending on rent, how much are they spending eating out, across, pretty much all demographic and psychographic profile of these people. And once you know that, it becomes quite easy to map them out across a particular geography. In this place, we're looking at Kampala, for instance. The black dot is a location that we're suggesting, and the green dot is places where they're already located at. And I'm going to go through different ways, different data layers that we use to suggest where we should be going into. So part of it is kind of understanding how organizations make decisions. So if you take a retailer, they want visibility, they want density of consumers, they want less competition and all that stuff. Now, leveraging data, leveraging geospatial data is possible to put all of that under, in one umbrella, under one umbrella to be able to kind of like advise where it makes sense to go. This is an example where we look at traffic density, for instance, during the day. With that, you're able to look at daytime concentration, whether it is government building, office buildings, whether it will be, whatever is important to them. So in this particular case, we're looking at schools, looking at hotels, we're looking at offices and all that stuff. To be able to see really where people gravitate towards during a particular time of the day. And of course, competition is very important, right? So if you want to expand, you want to go where nobody is already operating at, so we can establish yourself, unless you don't mind, fighting for the same consumers. So eventually, you need competition, but understanding how competition looks like in a particular location is very important. And that's something we can also map that out for companies to be able to make decisions. And this is very critical because eventually, because retail is very local, it's very important to understand the vicinity of that particular location. So this is what might be a defined catchment area. There's different ways to estimate that. Some organizations are looking at catchment area in terms of driving time. So let's say 10, 15, 20 minutes driving time from that particular location. Others are looking at just a radius. I want a 5 kilometers, 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers, depending on what is important to them. And in a lot of what we do, we tend to use driving time because that's more realistic. And in Lagos, you have to take into account traffic. So think about it times 2. And then you bring all of these analyses under one umbrella, right? Whether it's the traffic density, daytime population concentration, competition, and catchment area, to be able to see really what does people look like in the area that you're interested in. Within your catchment area, right? What is really the real opportunity there? And with that, you're able to say, okay, you know what? I'm looking at let's say ABC1 consumers in this particular location. This is how many of them are here. This is how much we spend, and this is what my competition looks like. To be able to really understand locations in a very systematic way to be able to inform decisions. I really want to spend a little more time around the support ratio, because we've seen a lot of companies fail because of not really paying too much attention to support ratio. Recently, we've seen the fall of Nakumatt in East Africa, in Kenya, and Uganda, and part of that is really due to, the challenge with support ratio. Basically, simply put, let's say if you're targeting if you estimate on average that your location will have 10 customers a day, it does not make sense for you to go to a place where there's only 10 customers, right? So you want to go to a place where there's at, let's say, 50, 60, 100, so that the likelihood of having 10 customers a day is actually a thing. Once you understand support ratio, basically it is the fact that how many critical mix of customers do I need in a particular location to be able to support my store, depending on whether you're looking at premium customers, for instance. You want a mix of premium customers and non-premium customers to be able to kind of like support your store, right? Support ratio is also important as you think about competition. If you're gonna be expanding toward a place where there are, let's say, 50,000 people already, and the support ratio for that particular location is around 35,000, it does not make sense to have 3 or 4 different competitors in that space, because you're going to be competing for the same customers. And understanding that ratio and understanding the dynamics around that is really important for companies as they think about expanding. And depending on how companies invest or understand support ratio, we see some that are succeeding and some that are not succeeding, right? And in Nigeria, we're already seeing companies that are, especially in the QSR space, that are trying to feel the heat of the support ratio issue, because there's so many people, so many companies fighting for the same customers, and ultimately some are kind of like destined to fail or to be challenged. The final piece I want to spend some more time here is really once we know populations, once we decide on who they are, where to go to, how do we actually reach those people? And part of that is leveraging geotag information, leveraging geospatial data to be able to kind of like target those people. This is an example of one of our online platform. We call it Data Frame. What it is able to get instant access to population while applying a number of filters and get a barrier of information on those people. So here I'm looking at, let's say, I'm looking at Surulere, and I'm looking at a 1 by 1 square kilometer in Surulere and able to understand something about people living there, right? Whether it is the ABC1 consumer mix, whether it is bank account ownership, TV viewership. Really, this is not exhaustive. It can be as much as a company might be interested in. And then once you know who these people are, where they're located at, you're able to kind of like determine whether it makes sense for you to be reaching out to them, right? What probably the best means to reach out? Is it through social media? Is it through TV? Is it through radio? Is it through newspaper? And those type of things. And finally, I know I'm running out of time. Finally, some of you might have already seen some of these slides, but once you know, this is an example. This is a map of Lagos with the location of what we call premium customers, right? And some of you might be surprised to see that there's a lot of them on the mainland. And these are the type of insight that we provide. In using that, companies can either determine whether it makes sense for them where to expand to, how to expand to, and also when you're planning a particular media campaign, what's the best way to be able to kind of like streamline and reach out to those target customers. So this is quickly framed, and we do a lot of work not only in retail but really across the board. We work in commercial space, development space, as well as the intelligence as well. So with that,
thank you. A round of applause for Ali, please. Have we got any comments or any questions for him? Okay, I think everything is perfectly clear. Thank you very much, Ali.
Thank you.
A round of applause as he leaves. Oh, actually, there's someone, Dolapo. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ali, for the presentation. Can you please provide some insights as to how exactly the filtering process works on the data frame platform and how you could potentially use it to select a location for a shopping mall? I know you did give some examples, but I know similar to how I think Nakumat or some of those retailers selected sites, you guys have done some work there. Can you just help us with some insight?
Yeah, great question. So the platform comes already loaded with a number of indicators, right? That is the segmentation of ABC1 consumers, bank account ownership, media consumption. But we also include point of interest, right? Whether that is other locations. If you're interested in QSR, we can include location of QSRs as well. If you're interested in, let's say, pharmacies, we can include pharmacies. But it's really, it's tailored. We spend a lot of time with organization to decide how we tailor that to their need.
Okay, thank you very much, Ali. Another round of applause as he comes down.